Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the Iranian Deal. Actually, the day after the deal. The Iranian Deal was in the bag from the start. Anyone who surveyed the landscape in Washington knew that. But even though we knew the outcome, whichever side of the debate you were on, some things are worth fighting for. And they're worth fighting for not only when you know you will win, but even more so when you know you're going to lose. Everyone involved in the debate about the Iranian nuclear deal knew that the chances of getting 67 senators to override the president's commitment to the deal was nearly impossible. Barbara Mikulski, the Democratic senator from Maryland, was simply the last senator to confirm what we already knew. For some, Mikulski's vote was the cherry on top of the sundae. For others, it was the last nail in the coffin. So why the rage? Why the storm? The fundraising, the speakers, the ads. What was all the hullabaloo surrounding the vote about? And was it worth it all? The answer is twofold. Most importantly, number one, President Obama needs to understand that this deal with Iran is a bipartisan issue. Even though he won, the president needed to hear, to feel in his kishkas, that critique of the deal was not meant only as a way of telling him to goose-step around Israel's prime minister and the supporters of Israel, but to let him know that Americans across the broad spectrum of the country were also wary of the deal itself. The president needed to, and still needs to, understand that people who support him are still uncomfortable with this deal. Senator Chuck Schumer did not commit political suicide by standing up to Obama. On the contrary, the Democratic senator from New York, the man who would be the next Senate minority leader, made a cold calculation, and he almost certainly cleared it with the White House before going public. Schumer said that the deal is done, but let me appease my constituency and let me help the Democratic Party down the road so that this does not become a Republican-Democratic split. And that's why Chuck Schumer chose to oppose the deal. Schumer's decision was at the same time a gift to his constituents and a gift to his party. I said there were two reasons. The other reason it was important to debate the deal was to enable Israel to fight to get the best swag bag they could get as a result of the implementation of the Iranian nuke deal. There is definitely a list, a Hanukkah list of goodies, that Israel wants and expects to receive once the deal that so definitely endangers their country is implemented. The list has been in formation for months. The longer the time frame between the signing of the deal in July and the 100% certainty of the deal going through, the more Israel can add on the list. When the U.S. Undersecretary of Treasury, Adam Zubin, was in Israel, it is this list that took him there. He spent 4 days on this very issue. The deal was always done. Now Americans across the divide, those cheering and those weeping, must accept that the time to debate is over and done with, and now the real work begins, keeping Iran's feet to the fire and making certain that the United States has the wherewithal to enforce the agreement will be another struggle entirely. In this case, there are no foregone conclusions. Iran is notorious for not living up to their nuclear commitments, and the United States is famous for looking forward to future goals and making peace, and infamous for not focusing on nitpicking and policy agreements. Good luck to all of us. On this point, U.S. Congressman Patrick Murphy of Florida said he supports President Obama's Iran deal because, among other things, it will bring peace in our time. Murphy used the infamous Neville Chamberlain quote to explain his support for the nuke deal. When I heard about it, I couldn't believe it. So I checked it out, and it was true. Here is the exact quote. I believe deeply in the unbreakable bond between the United States and Israel. This debate has proven to me that America and Israel are fortunate to have so many passionate, diverse voices who all want the same things. a nuclear-free Iran, a secure Israel, and peace in our time. In the interest of all three, I will be supporting this deal and voting against a resolution of disapproval in September. In 1938, worried about the advances of Hitler's Germany, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain went and signed the Munich Pact, which forced Czechoslovakia to give up to Germany the Sudetenland. That was supposed to appease Hitler's desire to conquer Europe. Chamberlain returned from the meeting with the Munich Pact in his hand, an umbrella over his arm, and announced at the foot of the stairs of his plane, "We have achieved peace in our time." Actually, that was part of Hitler's plan, which duped Western leaders. Murphy should brush up on his history because making such grandiose statements is seriously problematic. To illustrate some of the games Iran is still playing, listen and watch this. An Iranian plane flew right up to a U.S. aircraft carrier and filmed it. We have the video that Iran posted. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard said that it was part of normal activities in the Straits of Hormuz and was one of several ways in which they regularly patrol the entire region. The report said, quote, "The latest Revolutionary Guard operation is a mission to identify an American aircraft carrier passing through the region carried out by a Navy reconnaissance plane called Harbin Y-2. And then it added, "For some time, the Revolutionary Guard has had modern drone technology, and it is carrying out missions to identify foreign vessels in the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz." According to Tasnim, the Persian media outlet, the most well-known example is a Revolutionary Guard's drone reconnaissance mission to identify American aircraft carriers in the Straits of Hormuz. Images from this were broadcast live to a Revolutionary Guard commanders conference in Mashhad province. One part of the video that was released was hilarious. The crew on the carrier was seen staring at the plane, looking right into the camera. It was almost as if they were asking, "What are you doing here?" The United States did nothing. They just stood and watched as they were being filmed. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. I want to discuss two editorials today, not columns, editorials. They are unsigned and the view of the editorial board, one from the Wall Street Journal and one from the New York Times. First up is an editorial from the New York Times. It was published August 12, 2015. It is entitled, "Who Threatens America Most?" This is a huge issue in the debates and the discussions that are constantly up and about these days, not simply because the Iranian deal, but also because of the presidential election. People, candidates, pundits, leaders, and just about everyone is asking questions about our security. The answer is not so clear, and that is what the editorial points out. The editorial begins. In what order does the Obama administration rank the biggest external threats to America's national security? The short answer, it depends on whom and which agency you ask. Official opinion is all over the lot, a sign of the rapidly changing world, different bureaucratic priorities, and confused thinking, which raises this question. If officials cannot agree on what the most pressing threats are, how can they develop the right strategies and properly allocate resources? Then the piece continues to lay out the various opinions. Start with America's military establishment. Last month, the Pentagon put Russia at the top of its threat lists. General Joseph Dunford Jr., the incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, branded Russia the number one existential threat in his confirmation hearings, followed by North Korea, China, and the Islamic State, or ISIS. Other top military officials said much the same thing in testimony before Congress. So, Russia is first, then North Korea, then China, then ISIS, at least according to the Pentagon. Then the column says, wait, the White House and the President say something else. Last September, Mr. Obama declared that at this moment the greatest threats come from the Middle East and North Africa, where radical groups exploit grievances for their own gain. But which groups? Al-Qaeda or ISIS? For some time, the administration has considered Al-Qaeda the more serious threat because it carried out and is still planning attacks on American territory, while ISIS was mainly focused on seizing territory in Iraq and Syria to establish a caliphate. That is a very different list. And another number one threat emerges. Here it is. But on July 22nd, the FBI director, James Comey, declared ISIS to be the bigger threat. And CIA disagreed and said, in February, James Clapper Jr., the director of national intelligence, cited threats in cyberspace, including from Russia, as the chief danger, followed by counterintelligence, terrorism, and weapons of mass destruction. I'm confused, because now, finally, General Martin Dempsey, the departing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said in 2015 National Military Strategy, today's global security environment is the most unpredictable I have seen in 40 years of service. The best answer I can give from all of my insight is to say the situation is changing rapidly and we live in a very dangerous world. But in order to really protect ourselves, we need to prioritize the threat and confront them in that order. Regional risks are not threats to the homeland, and threats of emerging power are not the same as major sponsors of terror. This is a very scary analysis. Second up is an editorial from the Wall Street Journal. It's dated September 4th, 2015, and is entitled Khamenei, the Democrat. The piece explains that the Grand Ayatollah Khamenei wants the Iranian parliament, or as it is known in Farsi, the Majlis, to discuss the deal. This is exactly the opposite of President Rouhani's point of view. But the supreme leader always gets his way in Iran. Here is how the editorial begins. President Obama got the votes he needs this week to survive congressional rejection of his Iran deal, and now the administration is looking to bring a few more senators on board so Democrats can filibuster a final vote. If the absence of the U.S. democratic accountability disturbs you, consider its expression in Iran. We aren't entirely jesting. On Thursday, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei announced that Iran's parliament, known as the Majlis, would have final say on the nuclear deal. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has resisted submitting the agreement to parliament for fear it might reject it or add stipulations. The editorial then explains why Supreme Leader might want the debate. The Ayatollah begs to differ. Parliament should not be sidelined on the nuclear deal issue. He said on state TV, I don't have any advice to the Parliament about how to examine it, approval or disapproval. The chairman of the committee tasked with reviewing the agreement says it will present a report on the deal at the end of the month, with a vote expected mid-October. Remember, the Supreme Leader has rejected other deals. This may be his way of rejecting the deal and getting a better one. And the point of the editorial is to be careful and be prepared. Whatever Iranian democracy decides next month on the deal, its democratic supporters in the United States had better steel themselves for a rough ride. The Wall Street Journal rightly points out that all kinds of potential problems that could emerge from this deal. It suggests that the Iranians could easily, quote, take hostage a diplomatic agreement as easily as it can take a foreign reporter. That's worth thinking about. As a matter of fact, the other day, the Ayatollah said that if all sanctions are not lifted, if they are only suspended, then we in Iran will enforce the deal on our side only partially. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. Hamas publicized on its Twitter account this cartoon depicting a long-nosed Jew raping a woman in yellow, which is the color of Fatah, who is named the West Bank in the cartoon. At the same time, the Jew is shooting her two children. A policeman next to a sign, the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, is standing by idly, smoking a cigar and ignoring the rape and the murder. A man across the border, next to the sign, Gaza, stands on a helmet dripping with blood from a killed Israeli soldier. And that person calls to the woman, West Bank, get up and defend your honor and your children. The woman in yellow, meaning the West Bank, answers back, yes, I would like to, but I have no permit. This cartoon caused a huge backlash in the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas apologized for portraying the rape, and they redid the cartoon In this redone cartoon, the text reads, "Woman 2 to woman 1, I will attain what my children deserve and what you deserve." That is the Palestinian Authority of shame. The cartoonist added this text beside a visual. "This is the West Bank that I know." The text is on the policeman's guard hut, and it now reads, "Security Cooperation Position." This is reference to the security cooperation between the Israeli army and the Palestinian Authority. In the second version, the cartoonist differentiates between the population of the West Bank, which he supports because they fight and kill Jews, and the Palestinian Authority, which he still disdains because they cooperate with the Jews. The Palestinian Media Watch, who published these cartoons, correctly noted that we have not found any condemnation of the second cartoon in which the Jew was stabbed in the back and killed, nor the anti-Semitic depictions of the long-nosed Jewish rapist and the Jew as the child killer in the first cartoon. The condemnation only focuses on the depiction of the West Bank as submissive to Israel. Hamas also said that they were only critiquing the PA and not the Palestinians. The next two cartoons are actually Pictoons. They're pictures with captions. This is becoming very popular online. It's a whole new genre. Anyone with a computer and a little skill can do it. You take an existing news picture or splice a few images together, and then you write your own balloon with dialogue and captions. It's called Pictoons. These two are by Zion Mike, who lives in what he calls, quote, the anti-Israeli wackiness known as the Pacific Northwest. He makes fun of President Obama renaming Mount McKinley in Alaska and calling it by its original authentic name. The next frame is Bibi saying, "We could not agree more," and he's standing in front of a sign which says Judea and Samaria, instead of course, the West Bank. The next Pictoon is also by Zion Mike, and it depicts the Grand Ayatollah standing next to the Iranian President Rouhani. They're standing in front of a set of very large missiles. One missile says Tel Aviv or bust, and the missile also prominently has the symbol of J Street on it. The Ayatollah says to the president, "Well, you have to thank the sponsors," meaning that J Street was the sponsor of the nuke deal. Now that is a very harsh commentary, but in truth, J Street lobbied very hard for the deal itself. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Crooks beat up and tied two Holocaust survivors, aged 86 and 97, in their home in Amsterdam. The perpetrators called their victims dirty Jews and then stole their jewelry. The thugs knocked on the elderly couple's door and declared, "Police, open up." The thugs then badly beat the pair and threatened to cut off the wife's fingers to steal her rings. It all happened on August 4th, and the story only came out in September. The son of this elderly couple offered the reward of €15,000 for information that leads to the capture of the criminals. He posted pictures of his parents and their wounds on the internet so that people can see how heinous and brutal the attacks were. The pictures were very disturbing. The survivors, who were once independent, are now confined to wheelchairs and will probably be for the rest of their lives. Attacking the weak and the aged in their homes is vile and heartless. Attacking Holocaust survivors is a new low even for European anti-Semites. The police have promised to take the case, all it symbolizes and everything, very seriously. But now, more than a month later, the authorities have still not arrested a single perpetrator. This is what you call a shanda, a shame. In the world of Islam, it's the season of the Hajj. Muslims from all over the world make pilgrimage to Mecca and circle the Kaaba 7 times. Watching a video of this religious act, I observed that in the section reserved for the elderly and disabled in wheelchairs, a man was on a hoverboard, yes, a hoverboard, wearing white robes, holding his hands together. There was a blue glow under him as he scooted by all the other pilgrims. The hands-free Segway, as it's called, actually has wheels, but no handles. When you lean forward, it goes forward. When you lean back and shift your weight, it begins to slow down and stop. The web was filled with comments on the video and it went viral. Can one scoot or hover while performing the tawaf around the Kaaba? 7 circles? Must one walk? Can anyone use a wheelchair or only someone who can't walk? The next best thing, maybe you would think, is a motorized scooter, but a hoverboard? Islam meets the future, or back to the future. I'm not quite sure. This is simply a very weird story, but it's so important I have to tell it. I read about it in Ynet News. A character named Timothy Paul Jacobs Wordsworth, aka Batan el-Ghul, is fighting with the Kurds against ISIS in Iraq. His grandparents survived Dachau, but his parents converted to Christianity and he was taught to love Israel. Timothy was raised to fight for good and against evil. He joined the British Army and even moved to Israel, where he joined the Bratslav Hasidic sect. Timothy could not become a citizen of Israel at that time, but he will try again soon. Interesting, right? But not the most interesting part of the story. Here comes the most interesting part. Every place in which Timothy Paul Jacob Wordsworth fights and defeats ISIS, he tags it with graffiti. He writes his graffiti in Hebrew. He writes Na Nachman Uman, which means Rabbi Nachman from the city of Uman, the phrase on the lips of all Bratslav Hasidim. Timothy, aka Batan el-Ghul, says that he wants to bring sunlight to an area of darkness. And according to the interview in Ynet, he ends his practically every sentence with the phrase, Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives on. Now that's interesting. On a serious note, Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif said the other day that anyone calling for Syrian leader Assad's removal is wrong. He said Assad's departure will only cause more death and devastation. The importance of these comments is that they indicate how the lines are drawn and how each side sets up. In the West, it's simply assumed that Assad is bad and he must go. But Iran and Russia disagree. Remember, Russia just reestablished a very large presence in the Middle East that includes fighter jets to attack ISIS and al-Qaeda. The Russians have moved into a base outside of Damascus, and their pilots and their jets are all there already. We should never forget that Russia, together with Iran, have significant boots and weapons on the ground there. The West talks as much as they want about the ousting of Assad, but Russia and Iran are propping him up and making it more and more difficult to dislodge him. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that there's a tradition to eat pomegranates during the Jewish holiday season? There are several reasons, not just because they're sweet and we want a sweet year, or because they're one of the 7 species of the land of Israel. Pomegranates actually have 613 seeds. Each and every pomegranate has 613. And the 613 corresponds to the number of mitzvot, or commandments, in the Torah. Now that's something worth thinking about. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.